Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word Live and to Sunday Live. I need a better intro than that for a Sunday. How are we all doing? Are we all good? 1 week on from Australia, 1 week away from Bahrain. It is the season. We are well underway already. What a race in Australia as well. I don't care what anybody says. I thoroughly enjoyed that. So good to have F1 back. And of course, that means there's plenty to talk about. No more really terrible filler and speculation for these Sunday streams. So tonight, we're going to speculate our Red Bull title contenders. We're going to talk about Gasly's future as well. We're also going to talk about the 2021 regulations and also some stuff that's come out from McLaren just in the last hour, talking about how they could quit Formula One if the 2021 regs don't go their way. So plenty to talk about. It is my birthday. I'm going to say that now. So yeah. There you go. I've got that out of the way before everyone in chat starts on me with this one. I'm not announcing it as I didn't last year. Then it upset people. But I don't know why. I don't know why. People are weird. But yes. So thank you to everyone for your birthday messages today. Massively appreciated. 21 years old and 144 months, if you're wondering. There you go. I'll let you do the maths on that one. Nice and easy. I'm going to hop straight into it because we've got a fair bit to get through this evening. So good evening, Jonty. How are you, sir? I understand you've been watching the IndyCar and you've turned it off.
Yes, good evening, Sean. Happy birthday. I'm not going to sing happy birthday because that's copyrighted. We had enough trouble with that during testing.
That's true. That is very true. Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
I was watching it and they've elected to go with no track limits at COTA. So everyone's driving everywhere and it's ridiculous. But that's not F1.
I spotted that one. When I saw the stuff on Twitter, I thought I'd have a quick look, and then it just burst out laughing when they went through what should be turn 19. It's different. So anyway, we'll move on from IndyCar because this is an F1 stream. People won't like that. So good evening, Dan. Have you finished crying from last Sunday, mate? Grosjean, nil point. Or null point.
Oh, just about. I've finally crawled out of the cave. It was a disappointing weekend, but thanks for having me, mate. Happy birthday to you. Hopefully we make it a bit better and doesn't stress you out too much.
Thanks, mate. Alex, I assume my card's in the post or got lost in the post. I've not had one, so you know.
Yeah, it'll be with you soon. It's a long way from Devon to Lincoln.
Why did my head just try and work that out? Anyway, we're gonna hop on because we've got a few bits to talk about today. Actually, I just said at the start of the stream now we can avoid speculation because we're in season now, but I'm going to kick it off with some speculation, basically. Red Bull, possible title contenders according to Lewis Hamilton. I will go and find the quote whilst I'm here. I did get it open ready this week for a change. He said, it's great to see the improvement that it's had for the team, which is obviously the switch to Honda. He's then said they were with Renault for such a long time, blah, blah, blah. And then says the Red Bulls are with us, and I think we're going to have a really great battle through the year between the three of us. Toto Wolff has echoed that and said that he believes that Red Bull will be title contenders. What do we reckon, Jonty? I personally think, probably a caveat that's going to get put in for the first 4 or 5 races this season. We are nowhere near halfway into this season, let alone anywhere near the end of it. So it's a bit premature to be saying, yes, this team are title contenders, no, this team are not. But one thing is for sure, Honda and Red Bull started very strongly and very positively in Australia a week ago.
Yeah, they did. It was a lot better than everyone was expecting. There'd been sort of foreshadowing and dark thoughts from everyone considering the reliability of Honda, and they showed up in Australia with virtually no problems at all, which is fantastic. The only question that remains is on the power, and we'll get to see that in a week's time.
Yeah, Bahrain should give us I think Christian Horner said that it should give us a better indication of the running order. By the way, thank you for your super chats. I'll give them a readout. John T will remind me if he doesn't, Dan will. No pressure, guys, to do those before Q&A towards the end of the stream. So thank you very much, but I will give you a shout out a little bit later on. What did you make of Red Bull in Australia then, Dan? Because obviously I didn't get a chance to talk to you about it really last week. Were you surprised to see Verstappen on the podium?
Yeah, I think I was. I was surprised on Saturday as well, Verstappen splitting the two Ferraris, but I think we're all aware Ferrari were a little bit off the pace. But I suppose if we're all talking about Ferrari being in the hunt for the championship, then surely we must be saying Red Bull as well. I will just throw in there, I don't think they're going to be in the running for the constructors. I think out of the top 3 teams, they've probably got the weakest lineup. They still have a really strong lineup, and I know we're going to talk about Gasly a little bit later on, but I think constructors, that might be a bit too big of a stretch, but Verstappen looking really quick so far this season, and considering last year he had a bit of a wobble and yet still ended up 4th at the end of the year overall. I think he's one of those drivers that really can drag up a bit of a dodgy car. So even when that car isn't at his best, I think he's going to be able to pull out some great results. So why not? Yeah, they really could be in the mix.
So I suppose what we're saying is, or what you're saying there, Dan, is that Verstappen can compete for the drivers, but you're not convinced Red Bull have got the pace to do the constructors? Is that kind of what you're saying? That Verstappen is almost, going to get so much stick for this next line, Alonso-esque, in the sense that he can take a slower car and drag it into a good result?
Yeah, and I think at tracks like Monaco, I think he's going to win that this year pretty comfortably. Tracks like Austria, Mexico, I think they're really going to be able to take advantage of those circuits, and tracks a little bit like Melbourne, where perhaps they're not going to be the best car. I think, yes, he will be Alonso-esque, and I think he will be able to get some results that car perhaps shouldn't be in that sort of position.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, because I think there's so many question marks at that sharp end of the grid anyway, isn't it, Jonty? We've fantastic drive from Bottas on Sunday, but as I'm going to say a few times in this stream and over the next sort of week, one swallow doesn't make a summer. We need to see what he's going to do for the whole season. We really don't know what Leclerc's going to do at Ferrari. Was very good last season. Exceptional, even. We don't know what he's going to manage at Ferrari. Question marks over Ferrari's pace. We don't know what Gasly's going to do at Red Bull. So, in many ways, I feel like, kind of echoing what Dan said there, I can see Verstappen challenging for the drivers, maybe not having enough to get him over the line, but maybe challenging for the drivers, been in that mix. But I think the constructors, there are just too many question marks to call who's going to be where, because in theory, if Ferrari have got the pace they showed in winter testing and Leclerc hits the ground running, it should be theirs. But then Bottas rocks up on Sunday, and delivers that drive.
Well, yeah, exactly. And Bottas was the big surprise for everyone on Sunday. No one expected him to come out and dominate in such a massive fashion. I know there's bits of the damage, blah blah blah, but you can't deny that from lap one, he was just gone. He decided, I'm having this, and off he went. And that's going to be a massive thing in the championship, because even if it's just a one-off or a very rare occasion, then it's still going to be taking points out of the other title contenders. That's going to be the big thing. Who's going to be taking points off other people, not who can go out and surprise and dominate. I think that's going to be the biggest story that goes through this whole year. If you've got Leclerc having to play second fiddle to Vettel, that's going to be points taken away from Ferrari in the constructors, and it's going to be helping, Verstappen and Hamilton, who are scrapping with each other, not helping Verstappen and Hamilton who are scrapping with each other when they're fighting with their own team. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean, yeah. We kind of touched on it in the winter, didn't we? That even if Red Bull aren't contenders for the championship, they'll have a say in which way it goes.
Yeah, it's very much going to be a case of whichever team can actually work intended and not have scrap going on internally, because it seems so much closer. But again, this is only one race. We don't know if it's genuinely that much closer yet.
I think that the biggest telltale sign for me that kind of screams you can't read too much into Australia, and I know I spent 2 weeks before Australia talking about how you can't read anything into pre-season testing, but one of the biggest telltale signs is how close Haas were to Ferrari, not just in terms of the race pace, and I know they were still a minute back, but you know what I mean, closer than you'd have expected, but certainly on qualifying trim, were they within a second of the Ferraris, I think?
Yeah.
So that kind of tells you, doesn't it, that we can't read an awful lot into Ferrari's pace in Australia, because, and this could come back to bite me so hard at the end of the season, but if Haas are within a second a lap of a Ferrari, I will be stunned. It would be the biggest surprise in Formula One probably since Brawn, to be perfectly honest. Dan would be delighted if Haas were within a second of Ferrari, although it won't make much difference to Grosjean because he can't make it to the flag. But I think that kind of gives away to me that there's so much more to come from Ferrari. I think Bahrain's going to be their weekend. We've seen Vettel's won the last two in Bahrain. He's got the pace as well there to put it on pole. He was on pole last season, possibly the year before. I can't quite remember, back to 2017. But I just can't see Red Bull having enough, even with this positive start from Honda, Dan. I just can't see them having enough to get them, as I've already said, over the line at the end of the season. I think they can take points away, as Jonty was saying, from Mercedes and Ferrari. I think they can take more than 4 or 5 wins this year. But I think third. I said it in pre-season.
Yeah.
I said it in the build-up. I think third is about where they'll be.
Yeah, I think that's the safe bet, and I think that's the most realistic. This weekend, Ferrari, we're all assuming there was issues. Red Bull, there was no really talk about issues. It was just that was where the car was. They were happy with the pace. They were happy with that Honda relationship, and I think they were about just under a second off the pole time. So I think, yeah, it would be great, and I think it could be possible if they could get second if there's fireworks in that Ferrari relationship, which I think we'd like to see to spice up the grid a little bit. But I think that's wishful thinking. And I think, yeah, at best, Verstappen could perhaps throw himself into the mix for the drivers, considering this year at Red Bull, he is going to be the number one. They don't have that to play with this year. Now Ricciardo's gone. So that might help him in his favour a little bit. But yeah, I think safe bets is third place for Red Bull.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see Verstappen up there with Hamilton and Vettel fighting for the championship. I mean, if we're talking about things I'd love to see all 6 of the top 3 team drivers fighting for the world championship. That would be absolutely incredible. But kind of basically what you said, Dan, earlier, if you look at what Verstappen did last year, just missing out on third place in the championship despite, let's be honest, writing off the first 6 races of the season with all the incidents he had, effectively, to end up almost third just shows what he's got. So as long as that Honda engine is somewhere near what they had last year for Renault, I'd be surprised if he wasn't at least still being mentioned for the title. I mean, it might be that we get to, Mexico, somewhere around there, and he's 3 races from the end and he's like 70 points off the top of the championship and it's a real outside. But I think he's got a chance of being in contention when we get to those final few races. But I just doubt that he'll be able to take the drivers. I don't think the constructors, I do agree that the constructors is too far for them, to be honest, Dan. I completely agree with you on that one. But the big question mark at the moment is that Honda engine, that Honda power unit. People are still talking, Jonty, about its reliability and saying, Australia, it is quite a strain on the engine, but it's not going to be the strain that some tracks are. And yes, they've got going, but that first power unit's got to do 7 races and the next one's got to do another 7. That's where the big question mark still is around Honda, is that reliability, even though they took big step forwards last year and indeed over the winter.
Yeah, absolutely. And it stands to reason that we're going to see it put to the test very soon with Bahrain, because it's hotter and you've got that much longer straight, hell of a long main straight at Bahrain, which is full throttle for a good 800 meters. That's a long time for an engine that has question marks, and it's going to be a worry in that heat. If they can come through that without any issues, then it's definitely a plus point. But how much will it have taken out of that engine for, as you say, the next 5 to come after that? I mean, obviously they don't do it all in sequence. They chop and change the parts around, rest them, and have them checked out and worked on, and all the rest of it. But they're still doing that distance. And no one can ignore that big question mark because they just simply haven't got it right for 4-5 years.
Well, the rundown from pole to turn 1 is 501.9 meters, so that's getting on for halfway down the straight, isn't it? So I think, yeah, you're going to be looking at 800 meters. It's a lot of strain to put on that power unit. It's going to be fascinating the next couple of races, maybe even longer. Baku, I'm really looking forward to seeing that Honda in Baku, see what it can do down that seriously long straight in the final sector. But what are you making, honestly, Jonty, about there's quite a lot of hype at the moment, and I don't want to take anything away from Verstappen because it was an overtake and we were desperate for overtakes at times on Sunday, but his move on Vettel, there seems to be a lot of talk, and I've seen people going, you look at the way that Honda breezed past the Ferrari. Absolutely. He did have that extra power, that extra powerful DRS, though, to help him in that one. So I think that kind of taints that. Not taints it, but kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Takes a little bit away from it. Kind of harder to read. I'd like to see them go toe-to-toe on the straight and see what that Red Bull and that Honda has really got, rather than just looking at it and going, he's cruised past, but also he has DRS. Do you know what I'm trying to get at? It doesn't really give a true reading to me.
Yeah, and the track itself doesn't really give us a true reading of just how powerful that DRS is, because all of the zones in Australia are relatively short. I don't even think the main straight's completely straight. They've all got a slight bend to them. Not that it would make any difference to these cars, but they're still having to think about getting into a different position on the track for the next corner. What I want to see is the fact that the DRS is very powerful, but so much so that the cars are passed way earlier on the straight, giving the person defending a chance to tuck back in and pick up a toe again and fight back. Because if it does turn out to be way overpowered, that's going to be our saving grace. But I do think they always go the wrong way with the DRS, because it's always right at the end, from maybe halfway down the straight to the braking point. I really wish it would be the other way around. It should be DRS right at the start, the second they get on the power, so that they've got that to think about. They've got to control how they're getting the power down, and then have it shutting off just a bit further down, quite a bit before the braking zone, so that it's got them level. Then they've got to do the job on the brakes.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. That was the whole point of DRS in the first place, wasn't it? But it didn't really work out that way.
Yeah, that was always the intention for it, to get them level. Then they've got to do it with their skill. And unfortunately, even in years previous, we've seen them passed and gone before they get to the braking zone, and that's the problem. Although, as people have been saying in the chat, the other option, which I thought was a possibility, would be to make it half as powerful, but used wherever they like, so it's all in the driver's hands again.
Yeah, again, I'm not taking anything away from Max Verstappen at all. He's still got the move done. But Rayson makes the point in chat that I think we've kind of discussed quite a bit through the winter. The Honda isn't much better than the Renault, but it's not worse either. All Red Bull need, Dan, is for that Honda to be as good as the Renault. And we all know that with the chassis they build, they should beat them, because we saw with identical power units last year, sort of, although Red Bulls kept blowing up a bit more often than Renaults, interestingly enough. But we saw last year with what are technically identical power units, Red Bull were comfortably clearing third. So they just need it to be as good. And so in that case, they should be pretty much bang on for third. So maybe they can afford to take a few more risks than Ferrari and Mercedes can for the title.
Yeah, that's quite a good shout. That is, I hadn't really thought about that, but you're right. And I suppose with Toro Rosso as well, we spoke in the winter about how they're going to help development, and now they're a fully fleshed out works team. They're not having to battle internally with Renault, with Cyril, that we all got to see in the Netflix documentary. There's none of that. It all seems very rosy within Honda and within Red Bull. So that's really going to help them as the season goes on. But with the move as well, in the race, I'm pretty sure, well, Verstappen was on the better strategy, wasn't he, over Vettel? So I think that helped it a little bit, made it look a little bit easier than it actually was. And Leclerc was catching Vettel pretty quickly as well. So I think you're right. That is a sort of skewed sort of bit of information we can use. But I think it's going to be really interesting this year, seeing Ferrari and Mercedes perhaps being the better cars, fighting it out, and they're having their own internal battle. But like we say, the team are going to be able to do perhaps a more risky strategy, perhaps split the strategies between Verstappen and Gasly. Gasly could even pick up a few crazy victories if things go his way, because it's not going to be, I mean, we know F1, it's never just straightforward as the best car wins the race. So for sure, yeah, we could see some crazy results, and Red Bull could do some crazy things to try and get them. But you're right, looking at last year, their target needs to be to beat Renault. And over the winter as well, we said if they knew now they could get third place, they'd rip anyone's arm off straight away. So yeah, they will be happy with that.
I will say as well, a couple of people pointed out in chat that if reports are to be believed, or claims are to be believed, they weren't running that Honda power unit at full whack either in Australia. So the signs are very, very good. But very quickly before we move on to Gasly, it's kind of a Red Bull special tonight, weirdly. But before we move on to what I want to say about Gasly and what I think I need to moan about when it comes to Pierre, poor Pierre, come to you first, Dan. Can Red Bull, or are Red Bull title challengers? Do you agree with Lewis Hamilton and Toto Wolff?
Not Red Bull, no. That's too big of a stretch for me. But Verstappen for drivers, I think that could be an outsider chance. I'll say yes with that one. I'll split my opinion to be nice and awkward.
Oh, get off the fence, Dan. Go on then, Jonty. What do you reckon?
If Ferrari's pace in Australia is true, then yes, Max will be in the title fight. But if that was just a really poor showing from them that they got wrong, no, they won't be.
If that pace in Australia from Ferrari is true, we need them to be in the title fight.
Yeah.
I think we really do need them to. I'm going to stick with what I've said all winter. I think third. I think they will end up third. Nothing against either driver. I think it's their first year with a new power unit, new driver on board as well in the A team, if you like. So I think yeah, third place for them. See where they are next year. 2021 rules we'll talk about later. They've got to change as well. So I think if they could be third this year and take the fight to Mercedes and Ferrari at some tracks and then do the same next year, I think Red Bull will be fairly happy with that. It's question marks over their future, though, which will all come. And just to what Dan said, I meant to say, actually, when he said about it's all rosy at Honda, just give it a few rates. If that thing starts blowing up, you wait for all that rosiness to disappear. It won't take long. It won't take long at all. But let's get on to Pierre Gasly, because it seems ridiculous. I was talking to Jonty about this briefly earlier, and there was a lot of, I think you referred to it as Twitter banter, Jonty, about Pierre Gasly's future, and that's how I looked at it and thought, come on, it's just a bit of banter, messing about. And I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, but a Russian racer has come out and said that he believes that Daniel Kvyat could replace Pierre Gasly at Red Bull if he doesn't improve. I'm going to read the quote. He does go on to say it's premature to be saying it, to be fair to him. But he said, it was very good to see Kvyat showing his character and not letting Pierre Gasly go past in Melbourne. It is hard to know why Gasly drove so inexpressively, but if Kvyat continues in the same spirit, we can all have hope that Daniel could move to the stronger team. I understand that such thoughts may be premature, but for us, this situation is, of course, positive. It has been one race. Yeah, all right, you put it in the wall twice in testing, but that's kind of part of what testing's for, pushing the limits of the car and making mistakes so that you don't do them in the season. But it's one Grand Prix. The team admit that they were stupid and their strategy was stupid on the Saturday in qualifying. In fact, Helmut Marko said they owe Gasly an apology for their stupid strategical mistake on the Saturday qualifying. It's Australia, it's hard to overtake anyway. The pressure's on him because he's stepping into some pretty big shoes to fill in Daniel Ricciardo. It's his first race with a new team. He doesn't want to go sticking it in the back of another car or throwing it at the inside and ending up in the wall or ending up in a big accident, because that'll taint his reputation instantly. It's one race. I know we were quite critical in a sense of him on Sunday, Jonty, because we felt like he should have got further through the field, and I think he absolutely should have done, but are people really already starting to point the finger and say, it's time to move him on because he put it in the wall in testing and because he only got back to 11th from 17th on Saturday or whatever it was on Sunday?
It's totally unfair. I think this is the first race situation where he's driven that car. All the cars behave differently. They all feel different. I personally think it's something that all the teams should think about a lot more, possibly in testing or possibly in FP1, by having their drivers run a load of laps line astern from each other to see how they perform and feel behind another car. But that's something else. Makes sense to me. But it is way too early to be calling something like that. We know it could happen because we know Red Bull, the whole sort of Red Bull family, are quite happy to chop and change drivers around, but certainly not after one race. It's insane to even be thinking about it. It was just not a great first race for him, and it led to, like I said, some bantering on Twitter. Someone posted something in a jokey manner. Even I replied saying, taking the meme, Pierre, it's Helmut. Everyone was just having a bit of a joke with it, but he managed to bring the car home.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, you don't want to go having a massive accident in your first race, do you? Or taking out, the last thing he wanted to do was put that in the back of Daniel Kvyat or at them both ending the gravel, because then he's in double trouble, isn't he? Because he's taken out another one of their cars. But it is ridiculous, isn't it, Dan? Well, I know, I've just seen someone in chat saying he did do it in testing as well. Yeah, but that's what testing's for, pushing the limit and making mistakes. As long as you're not doing it in races, It's ridiculous at this. Okay, fine, the banter on Twitter, it's always going to happen. Valtteri, it's James memes are still flying around, even though it was 6 months ago. Move on. But you know what I mean? Those memes are still flying around, so it's fine in that respect. When people come out and people start writing articles on it, it's just it's so pointless.
Yeah, it's a little over the top, isn't it? I can't deny. On Saturday, I wasn't too upset he was out in Q1 because if he actually did get a lap in, Grosjean would have been out in Q1 or Raikkonen because multiple teams made the same mistake at Red Bull. It was just, as Red Bull, it was just the fact they were the unlucky ones. I think it was 5 thousandths off of Grosjean's time Gasly was that put him out. So it was super, super close in Q1, which I thought caught out a lot of teams, which is great for the midfield fight that we've been bigging up all winter because it seems that this year that is going to be so, so close. And I know I haven't spoke to you guys about the race, and it was disappointing he wasn't able to get up through the field as good as a Ricciardo. You'd expect he would be able to do more of a Verstappen, but is that his role at Red Bull? Ricciardo was very much equal with Verstappen, but I think Red Bull, to be honest, are just going to be happy if he does okay as a consistent driver, but they don't really want him to shine and perhaps push Max as perhaps they wanted Ricciardo to do. So I'm not too worried for Gasly. And on the Kvyat side of things, I didn't think he actually had a particularly good weekend. He had a pretty awful qualifying, was behind Alex Albon, managed to fluke out a little bit his race strategy, being able to do the overcut on a whole host of drivers due to that Giovinazzi train. So that helped him out there. He tried to overtake Stroll and almost brought the torpedo back into Formula One officially. So I don't think it was the cleanest weekend from him. Yes, he got points, and that's brilliant. And that's what everyone needs to try and do in that midfield because it's going to be so difficult for drivers. But yeah, it's too over the top for race one. And I would like to see it as Twitter banter.
Just having a look at something. Bottas 15th to 8th last year. So it's not like Gasly was a million miles off that. What was he, 18th in qualifying? So 18th to 11th?
Yeah, exactly.
And Bottas was in his second year with it's ridiculous. It's so unnecessary. It's just so... Look, I'm going to say something now. Jonty's already asked me for predictions of the lottery numbers so he can pick the different ones. Do you remember last year when we were having all this over Stoffel Van Dorn and Brendan Hartley? And I said... Don't judge them after the first few races. Give them the first third of the season. Give them 7 races. And if they're still absolutely dire after that, yes, let's talk about their future. That went well. And I'm going to say the same about Gasly. Sorry, Pierre, I'm about to ruin your season. But 7 races. If we get to Canada, Jonty, and he's picked up a handful of points, he's never been on the podium, his qualifying pace is nowhere, and he's been very poor, then we have the conversation, surely.
I'd say he needs to be picking up points and at least one podium in the next 7 races. That should be fair for a Red Bull, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like Gasly's there to do... He is Verstappen's number 2. I don't think he's going to be ordered out of the way quite as much as some people are saying, but he is there to kind of... bolster, if you like, add to the points that Verstappen could pick up. So if Verstappen ends up 6th in a race, then so long as Gasly's 7th or 8th, I think they're quite happy. If Verstappen wins the race, as long as he's on the podium or challenging for it, I think they're happy with him. So that's all he needs to do. All he needs to do. This is Sean sat in his chair talking about Formula One, not doing it. All he needs to do is get close to a podium. But I think you get what I mean. That's kind of the job he's got to do at Red Bull. So I don't think there's as much pressure on him as maybe people make out. But I think all this speculation about his future, it's nonsense. I'd kind of let it go if it was his second season with the team. Yeah, people are comparing Kvyat and the Verstappen situation to swap there, but Kvyat was in his second season and he made a couple of mistakes. I kind of contradicting myself in what I've said previously, but I can sort of understand that from the Red Bull perspective. Max Verstappen had a very good year previously with Toro Rosso. Yes, Kvyat had a good year with Red Bull, but then he'd made the mistakes early in the season. They were looking for any excuse to get Verstappen in that car. Kvyat gave him them. So I don't think you can make the comparison between the two, which I see a lot of people doing. Completely different things. You know, if Ricciardo, and people won't like this, if Ricciardo had done what Kvyat had done at the start of the season, I think he would have been under pressure from Verstappen. They just wanted any excuse to get Verstappen in that car. So do you see a comparison anywhere between Gasly, Kvyat, Verstappen, that kind of situation there, Jonty?
No. It could happen. Gasly could stick it into someone, 2 or 3 times in the next couple of races, and it would be something of a comparison. But the difference is they haven't got a Max that they're desperately wanting to get in the car. They just want someone who's picking up loads of points at this stage. That's why I've always been quite defensive of Kvyat, because it was a very political and unfair dropping of him. Like I said, he was just a scapegoat. His only mistake was giving them an excuse. A very, very poor excuse, but an excuse nonetheless.
Yeah. And I think Racer made the point as well in chat. Basically, I've not got the message up, but basically, who else is there for Red Bull? Even if Gasly is pretty poor, I can't believe I'm playing. For anyone who's new to the channel, I often do this. I play devil's advocate. I look at the other side of the argument. I completely disagree. His future shouldn't be. There should be no question marks around his future after one weekend where the team screwed up in qualifying by their own admission. There should be no speculation. But looking at the other side, let's say they do decide to get rid of him, they're going to have to swallow quite a bit of humble pie, Dan, to take back Daniel Kvyat. Can you just imagine what they're going to... When they brought Kvyat back to Toro Rosso, they were, he's matured in a year. He's a completely different man. He's a completely different driver. What are they going to have to say if they promote him to Red Bull? Can you imagine?
Well, I'm trying to think with all the options, because if they still... Okay, let's say Kvyat also has a pretty awful year. Albon's a bit better. I don't think they'll want Albon to go to Red Bull because they'll say, he's too inexperienced. And their other option, arguably, would be Sainz. And it's going to be a similar sort of thing where they've got to now say, McLaren, can we have him back, please? And I don't think they'll want to do that. So I think they're really stuck. And yeah, we're trying to play devil's advocate, but I think Gasly, age on his side, he can have 2 or 3 years there. He doesn't need to be great. He just needs to be as consistent as he can be. But yeah, imagine Red Bull groveling is a beautiful thing to be thinking about, to be honest.
Sorry, what was that, John? So you think Dan Tickton would be a good replacement for Pierre Gasly? Did I catch that right? No swearing on stream.
He should be banned from all racing.
Anyway, I'm not even going to go into Dan Tickton. He's put something out today moaning about how sort of woe is me, another one of his woe is me posts. But yeah, I kind of agree with racing. There wasn't really anybody to fill that seat at Red Bull. There wasn't really anybody to fill the seats at Toro Rosso. So they had to go back and go get... I think they dropped Albon as well, didn't they? I believe at one point.
Yeah,
so
they did, yeah.
It's a little bit... The thing is, last thing on this one from me. The reason this gets... If... Leclerc had he wasn't great for Ferrari, but not a bad debut. But if he'd have been absolutely horrible at the weekend, or Antonio Giovinazzi, who I think drove well given the damage to his car, if he'd been absolutely awful, people would go, oh well, it's only one race. The problem is, as we've kind of touched on, Red Bull have set a precedent, which means that as soon as one of their drivers does a bad job, everyone's going, they're going to get dropped, time to drop them. Max Verstappen, 6 mistakes or 6 lots of contacts in the first 6 races of the year last year, and people are going, no, Verstappen needs to go, put someone else in that car. That's Red Bull's fault that speculation gets thrown around, isn't it, Jonty? They've set that precedent.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably the reason why people have been talking about it.
Exactly. I was taking a deep breath before I move on because it does annoy me. I don't mind, like I say, if you get 7 races into a season and a driver's been poor, then you can start to say, well, is it tight? Are they right for that seat? Is it time to swap them out? Is it time to bring somebody else in? Do they need to look for a driver next year? But one flipping race, it is ridiculous. But equally, I suppose without getting people on my back again about Bottas, one swallow doesn't make a summer, as I've already said, doesn't mean that Bottas is going to win the World Championship because he had a really good race in Australia. So I think we all need to calm down. Bahrain is going to be the first real indicator of where everybody is. And then we're going to see if that is replicated in China. And then 8 weeks later, they get the B-Spec cars out and we all have no idea again. So there you go. But 2021. 2020, is that... I seem to recall one of the first streams we ever did, Jonty, was on 2021, and we're still talking about it now, nearly a year and a half down the line, because still nothing official in place, but rumours are, or reports are, in fact, no, officially, I'm just reading it now, officially, there is a meeting on Tuesday with the FIA and Liberty Media and the teams about the 2021 overhaul, the new regulations, and I would expect then we'll probably get a few leaks in the press and maybe some announcements over what's going to happen in 2021. I was just going to sit and let us chat for a bit about things we'd like to see change, just nice and relaxed. But then I was just going on to Planet F1 and found an article which I need to read from Zach Brown. For McLaren, it has to tick two boxes: to be financially viable and to be able to fight fairly and competitively. If it wasn't that, we would seriously have to consider our position in F1. That's not a position we want to be in. So McLaren are the latest to throw their quit threats hat into the ring for 2021 if they don't get what they want. Cyril Abitbol, Toto Wolff, and I can't remember, I think another one's come out, probably might even have been part of that interview from Zach Brown as well, talking about how they want a cost cap implemented. Toto Wolff believes that it's a good thing for Formula One. To the press. I don't quite know what he's saying behind closed doors, but that's what he's saying to the press, so that's what we're reading. A lot of quit threats being thrown around at the moment. A lot of people talking about wanting this cost cap. How seriously do you take this, Jonty? Do you think McLaren would actually quit, given that, with all due respect to them, if it wasn't for Formula One, they wouldn't be where they are now?
It was a surprise to hear it, I must be honest. We certainly expect it from Ferrari, and we kind of expect it a bit from Mercedes and Red Bull because they're up at the front. They want to keep things as they like them so they can keep getting the results. McLaren, they literally wouldn't exist without Formula One. I mean, now they do have a road car division, which is probably bringing in a lot more money than Formula One based on the last few years' performance. But they are all about Formula One. And it's worrying to hear it from them. I must be honest, I would put more weight to that than anything from the top three.
I think it sort of kind of points out where McLaren are as well as a team, doesn't it? In many ways, if they're starting to worry about the financial side of things, then that's a concern, because you'd expect they've got quite a bit of money behind them because of their previous success, the extra little bonus they get as well. I believe they get a bonus, like a much smaller one than Ferrari, but they get something for a long-standing team or whatever. And then you throw into that, as you said, their road car business. You think they'd have the money behind them, but McLaren are a weird one. McLaren are a weird one at the moment because they used to be all about Formula One. That is what they were, and then all of a sudden it was starting to venture since Zach Brown come on into IndyCar and things like that, and now there's talk of concerns over the future regulations and it might quit, and it makes you wonder, doesn't it, whether maybe they've spread themselves too thinly or maybe they are a little bit disillusioned with Formula One, and if they can't be competitive, it's time to move on, which I think will be a huge loss. If Claire Williams had come out, by the way, and said, we're going to quit if we don't get a cost cap, that wouldn't surprise me because they are struggling. So that wouldn't be a big surprise. But I agree with you, Jonty. A big surprise here from McLaren. What do you make of it, Dan? It'd be I know people laugh at the situation McLaren are in, and a lot of people don't like Zach Brown, but it'd be a massive loss to the sport, wouldn't it? A name like McLaren.
Oh, it'd be huge. It would be absolutely massive. One of the biggest fan bases of any team as well. What I find bizarre is, over the past, I suppose, 4 seasons, they've been very short-sighted in a lot of the things they've been saying. You know, we've got the best chassis. Honda are going to be, the best engine on the grid next year. We've got the best drivers. Very short-term thinking. It's never quite gone right. This year seems to be the first season in a very long time where they're saying, look, realistically, it's going to be 5 or 6 years before we're anywhere near thinking about challenging for a title. We've got 2 drivers signed in long term, and it's all seemed very calm and realistic at McLaren, which I've really enjoyed over the winter. I thought it was a really fresh outtake from them. So already after one race, we're switching it back up again. Seems bizarre. I think similarly to you two, I'm surprised, but also Zach Brown's come in, and I know, well, I don't want to speak for you two, but I'm not the biggest fan of Zach Brown. I don't think he's the best decision for McLaren, and they're going to try and change it up this year with, I think it's Seidel, as you pronounce his name, coming into the team, and I think that'll release Zach Brown a little bit to do other things, but it's Formula One's their home for McLaren, and I think a lot of people would be really disappointed with the team if they went to IndyCar, if they went to the WEC, and I didn't want to say it, mate, but Formula E as well. I know they're producing, sorry, but they're producing batteries for that. And I don't want to see McLaren go over to Formula E. They should be in Formula One. They're one of the pillar teams in Formula One. So, yeah, that is a crazy statement. And I hope it's just a bit of classic McLaren trying to get in the headlines.
Formula E and IndyCar in one stream. I'm in so much trouble. You guys can moderate the comment sections later. It's fine. Yeah, I'm weird. I quite like Zach Brown's approach to what we see on TV and videos. You know, gets involved, takes cars around the track, likes to do all that kind of thing, all the PR stuff. But I don't think he's the right fit for McLaren as a leader. I don't think he's leading that car well at all, that team well at all. But you know, it is what it is. There's not much more I want to say on Zach Brown, but it was a big surprise to see McLaren sort of talking about their future. But we'll talk about the cost cap while we're on it before we start putting our crazy ideas for rules forward. I'm not sold on a cost cap. I think it's a good idea because it's going to help. It should, in theory, help to narrow down the field. My concern, Jonty, as I've said 1,000,001 times, is how do you police that for teams like Red Bull, who have got Toro Rosso, and Ferrari, who have got Haas, who they'll, if there's a cost cap, they'll definitely keep on board, and Alfa Romeo as well. You know, yes, all right, Red Bull say we've spent this much, that's our budget, but we don't know what they've done behind the scenes at Toro Rosso in terms of development, what they've taken from there. It's a difficult one to police, just in my view.
Well, exactly. It's an impossible one to police. Even going beyond that is a case of, you know, if they've got people actually analysing all of their, you know, incomings and outgoings and the fine details of all the stuff they've spent, you still always get those bits that are listed as sundries and contingency and other, which mysteriously don't have receipts and all stuff like that. You know, you don't spend 30,000 euros on a hammer or 20,000 euros on a toilet seat. It's very, very bizarre that they could think that it could be policed. We'd all like it to be in because, in theory, it would even things out. But is that Formula One? I don't think it is, because that extra money leads to the ridiculous development of pushing what should be the pinnacle of motorsport.
So you say you don't spend 20,000 euros on a toilet seat. You've obviously not seen my bathroom. No. Yeah, I get. Yeah, we should have this. I mean, I think we can all agree the gap from the top three to the rest of the field is ridiculously huge. That is too big. But there's always been that gap there. And yeah, all right, the richest teams are always going to do better than those, the haves versus the have-nots, if that makes sense. But the problem is you've got the only way to manage that is either with a cost cap or make things more spec. And the problem is, as you've said there, basically, Jonty, is whichever route you go down, it's restricting the teams that are going to throw development forward, meaning that we're not going to see the development race that we're going to get this year, for example. And it's a hard one to read and try and get across what I'm trying to say, because I don't think Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull should be handicapped. I think Renault and Co should be catching them. I don't think it's fair to handicap the top three teams because they are the ones that are developing a good car and then winning race and championships with it. On the flip side, though, the reason they're doing that is because they've got the money behind them to do it, and Racing Point, even with Lawrence Stroll's investment, haven't got the money to do that. So I really struggle with it, Jonty. Really, really struggle with it. With the cost cap, I get the point of it. I'm not convinced it'll work. I'm not convinced they'll be able to police it. And I think it does take something away from the sport. But the money that's spent is crazy at the top end of the field. Crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Brayson just hit on it quite well, saying spec parts won't help because cost isn't the issue. It's the spending that's the issue. Now, it might sound counterintuitive, but it does make sense. You know, things do cost a certain amount to get it to a good level that performs. It's only when you go and spend ridiculously above and beyond that you get the extra microscopic gains. And that's where the top teams with the massive budgets are gaining. So again, it's such a difficult one to police. But I definitely wouldn't have spec parts, because that is completely not what Formula One is. Although You could argue we already have spec parts.
Yeah.
The black pit's stuck around the rims.
Yeah, the what's it called? I want to say the ECU.
Well, I was going to say tyres.
Yeah, tyres. But I think the ECU is one that's spec as well. I think certain things spec doesn't bother me. Things like I don't even know. Just anything in that car that is going to make no difference to us as spectators doesn't bother me being spec. It's when you all of a sudden see them all rock up on the grid and look identical. Nothing against the likes of Formula E that are spec series, because they work brilliantly, because that's what they are. Formula One is not a spec series and should never be a spec series, but something has to be done to bring the cost down. And obviously, as Racing said there, spec won't be the answer to that. I don't think a cost cap is the answer, because I think teams will find a way around it. It's a pickle, isn't it, Dan? But then I'm going to put this question to you, and I suppose chat will have their say on it as well. And maybe I agree with my own statement here with what I'm going to come out with. Is F1 really in that much of a mess? Really? Or is it just getting over dramatized because people don't like seeing the same one or two teams winning all the time? Which has been the case since, by the way, forever in Formula One. Dan doesn't know.
Sorry. No. I need to just refine myself. Okay. I what you've just said there, I fully agree with. And while you two were just talking, I was thinking to myself, well, is there really that big of an issue? And Formula One, if they do add a cost cap, make it more parts spec, do they really need to do that? Do they really need to upset the balance? Because we look at the midfield, we go into Bahrain this weekend not knowing who's going to be best of the rest. You know, we could even see Haas and Alfa Romeo, who perhaps looked the better of those midfield cars. They could slip back behind your Racing Points, you're behind your Renaults, who had a difficult weekend. So that midfield battle is really good. And like you said earlier, Sean, it's can they make that jump up to the forward three teams? That's going to be really interesting to see the likes of Renault over the next few years. Is adding a cost cap going to help that? Is it just going to put off your big teams? Is it going to perhaps spread out the midfield even more? So I think they've got to tread carefully, because I don't actually think it's in an awful place, because realistically, Ferrari could have won the last two championships. If that had happened, would we be having the same reaction now? If Red Bull had perhaps stayed with Renault and that Renault engine was as good as Mercedes or Ferrari, would we be having this conversation that we need to change things up? I'm not too sure we would be saying that. So I don't think we're in a terrible place. I do think something needs to be changed, because the gap is a little too big between Red Bull and Renault, we will say, and Williams to the rest of the field. But Williams have got their own problems, haven't they? So I will just say they need to tread carefully. I think it's not all doom and gloom like some people will have you think.
No, I agree. Something needs to change, but it's not as bad as everyone's making out. Or it's not everybody. Some people are making out, but yeah, that's not gone where I expected to go, the 2021 rules. We're going to talk about some things we'd like to see change, or things we expect to see implemented on Tuesday. As far as I know, it's just going to be effectively a blueprint that's going to get presented to teams on Tuesday, and they're going to go, yeah, I like it. Or more likely, nope, I'm off and taking my ball. I don't want to play anymore until I get what I want, which is probably more likely what we're going to hear over the weekend in Bahrain. Second year in a row, it will all be kicking off in Bahrain around 2021 rules. But what are you expecting on Tuesday? If we hear anything, Jonty, we might not. You know, we all know that F1 like to keep things very quiet and nothing ever gets leaked. But what are you expecting to hear next week in terms of the regulations? Do you think it's going to be this big overhaul, or have Liberty been beaten down by the big teams, do you think?
There's a worry that they've been beaten down by the big teams. I'm still holding out a tiny slither of hope that they will present the blueprint and go, those are the rules. And if the teams say, oh, we don't like them, they'll say, you know where the door is. Which is what should have been happening for the last 40 years, to be quite honest. You know, the teams should not have a say in what the regulations are. It should be, these are the regs, you build to them. As for what I think we'll see, that will probably be proposed that the cars have more of a sweep backwards to make them look faster instead of actually being faster. I'm hoping that they free up the ERS to be driver deployed and not completely tied into the system as a whole. I think that has been talked about before, and it would make a lot more sense. But beyond that, I don't see many changes coming.
No, because the power unit was the one they wanted to change, and they wanted to make big changes there. And the teams were like, "No, we've spent millions on getting these power units to where they are. We don't want to change it." And there seems to be 1 week the MGUH is going, the next week it's staying, depending on who comes out and speaks in the press. So there's question marks over that. So in terms of power unit, we're not going to see much change at all. I reckon we're going to see some kind of hybrid of the three ideas that Ross Brawn put forward. I think it was Ross Brawn for those concepts for 2021. I don't think we'll see anything as aggressive as any of those, but maybe a few bits taken from it to try and make the racing closer and, like you say, make the cars appear faster. But ultimately, I don't see that many changes, Dan, unless you either have some inside information or you've got a gut feeling that we're going to see something completely different come 2021.
Well, I'd love to have some inside information. That would be cool. No, I don't see much changing. I'm intrigued to see what they do with the Halo. I remember a couple of years ago, they really seemed to want the aero screen, and then it was decided that, the Halo for now was going to be the way to go. And it's all gone very quiet. I'm not a hater of the Halo. I think it's fine. I think it's, I was going to say, non-visible now. I don't think anyone watches a Formula One race and goes, "Oh, the Halo again." I don't think anyone really does that anymore like they did at the beginning of last year. So I'm maybe thinking they might switch that up a little bit, maybe, if I'm going to say being optimistic, but that's probably more because I want a bit of change. But I don't see anything completely major like we were perhaps hoping at the beginning of last year. So, yeah, it's going to be very straightforward. And I imagine as well, on Tuesday, we're not going to really learn a fat lot, are we? But it's always fun to speculate.
In terms of the Halo, I'll make a prediction. I got one right. By the way, what a moment on Sunday when Bottas won the race. I got a prediction right. Come on. I didn't predict it till the last lap. No, I'm joking. I predicted at the start that Bottas would win and I got it right. So that's all that matters. So I'm going to make a prediction on the Halo. Nothing will change. Maybe the shape will change slightly. I believe, tinfoil hats on, that all of this, no. This is just spec one. I think that was to just, while people were kicking off, to keep a few people quiet. And now people are kind of going, the what? The Halo. Yeah, I remember kicking off about that. Now F1 are like, we don't have to worry about that anymore. It's doing the job we need it to, and we don't need to change too much. So maybe a change in shape, but I don't think that's going to change too much at all. I hope we get something. But a couple of people in chat, I'm not able to go back and find who you were, but thank you for saying it, because it's a very good point. A couple of people saying, what the rules need to be, Jonty, is stable. If the rules are stable, the cars will get quicker, the cars will get closer because people will develop over time. So what we need to do is get to 2021, put some rules down and go, that is the rules for the next X amount of years, so we're not having rule changes. Because let's not forget, 2014 was the big one, then 2017, there were changes for 2019, and then we got changes again in 2021.
Yeah, exactly. And it's absolutely right. We do need more stability. It's at the point now when we're really seeing law of diminishing returns hitting the top teams more than it has been over the last 2 or 3 years. That much is certain. We're seeing the midfield get a bit closer. They're certainly getting closer together, but they're also getting closer to the top ones, certainly on race pace. That just needs to remain for much longer. I mean, what's the longest period we've gone without a major rule change so far in recent memory? What, 3 years?
2014 to 14 maybe?
Well, no, because there were still lots of little bits of changes
Yeah.
in that time, mainly around the nose, which obviously has a massive aero effect. Even if it was just changing how it mounted to the wing itself, they do a lot of playing around there. So it really does need to be stable. I mean, I'd love to see them bring back ground effect, because that would get rid of so much of the following problem. DRS would go straight away. And I still don't understand why they don't. To be quite honest, the biggest safety issue was when it stopped working, the cars took off. And the cars were aluminium and steel shells, which tended to crumple and grate drivers instead of protect them. It's a non-issue now. The cars are about as safe as they ever can realistically be, in my opinion, without going to insane extra levels of cost and intrusiveness to the driver. So yeah, let them do it.
A couple of points in chat. Says there hasn't been any significant changes for 5 years. We've got 5 years of single team domination. I would consider 2017 significant. I would consider this year moderately significant. It's not nothing, but it's not the most amazing change we've seen. And I wouldn't say that Mercedes dominated last year or 2017 either. They still won the championships, but they didn't dominate. And there was another one I spotted. I'm reading these. I've seen people asking, putting similar things forward, so I'm reading these out. So, stable rules mean the same team wins pretty much every championship. That's not entirely true. I get that it sort of is and sort of isn't. It's about closing the field up, which is a thing. But rule changes came in loads in the past, and the same teams were still winning. So, I get the point on that one, but I still think changing the rules. I suppose it goes back to the cost cap thing in many ways. Changing the rules every other season or every 3 seasons means that Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari are just going to keep pulling away because they've got the money to keep throwing at the rule changes. Look at the problems Williams have got.
Yeah, and there is another point that people have been mentioning is that the cars are too big. That is a massive thing.
Far too wide. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. You've got to think Monaco has become narrower because of the improvements in safety barriers and what have you than it was back in the 60s, 70s. And the cars, in some cases, are up to sort of 500, 600, 700 millimeters wider. That's a hell of a lot to try and fit them all around, and that's why the races become so boring there.
Agree. Absolutely agree. We're going to move on because that's not gone where I expected it to, but it's fine. It was a good chat. So, to some Q&A because I've got to finish soon because I'm going out for a meal because it's my birthday. Jason Rogers says, happy birthday. It's my birthday too. Oh, happy birthday, mate. Happy birthday to you. Another birthday twin. Got a few, apparently. Thank you very much for your donation. Andrew, I said it would be Ferrari, Red Bull, Merc. You all called me crazy. Well, look who's laughing now. In all seriousness, though, while Red Bull might not have quali pace, they make up for it with race pace. Thank you very much for your contribution. I'll hold out on too many comments, but Ferrari were third fastest in Australia in the end. I'm joking. Thank you very much to Project JDM Performance. For subscribing, Andras to the Toilet Seat Fund. Thank you very much, mate. And Andrew again, another super chat says, for 2021, I want more effort put into ground effect. So thank you very much for your contributions. Ground effect is something we've debated before, isn't it, John T? Do you think it could see a return to Formula One now? Do you think we're at a point where it's safe enough to at least revisit that idea?
Absolutely. It really is very, very much safe enough. You know, you look at horrific accidents that have happened because of the ground effect. You know, braking. You've got, obviously, the tragic death of Gilles Villeneuve, but he hadn't done his seatbelts up, which led that massively to that, and he was driving very angry. Around 80, 81, there was an enormous one for Manfred Winkelhock in an F2 car, which showed perfectly what happens when ground effect loses its suction. The car just takes off, and he was very lucky to get out of that. That could well happen a lot now. You know, there could be incidents, front wing clips another car, but the front wings would also be much smaller because they're not needed as much. And that sudden loss, car takes off. But with these cars, it's just going to tumble down the track, come to a rest, and the driver will get out. You know, the safety issue is gone. So it's still, I just don't get why they're not even looking into it.
Maybe they will. Maybe they will. Maybe it's something that we might get a big shock on Tuesday or later in the week where they go ground effects are on the table again. Maybe they'll look at it in the distant future, but I get the impression they'll try everything and that'll be a last resort. That's kind of my feeling.
It even starts small. Ditch the plank.
Yeah.
The plank was only brought in as an emergency knee-jerk measure to slow the cars down by raising their ride height after the accidents at Imola in 94. So that's instantly a very, very big gain they can make without generating more dirty air and without sort of dramatically affecting other parts of the car right now.
Oh, the plank under the car. I thought you meant Grosjean, sorry.
Wow, shocking.
If you pop some questions in chat, everybody, I'll answer a few before I have to disappear. There was... Oh, yes. Oh, Dan, I'm going to come to you on this one, mate, okay? I read some stuff. I went digging because I get bored. I haven't... Formula One's my life. It's all I ever do, so I got bored. There's some reports came out. I think it might have been Germany. I'm pretty sure it was Italy, saying that Nico Hülkenberg is on Mercedes' shortlist to replace Valtteri Bottas. And these reports... I think the report came out just before Australia, but it gained a bit of traction after that win in Australia, which tells you all you need to know about how BS this story is. Nico Hülkenberg on the shortlist. First of all, back to the point we made earlier on Gasly, it's far too early to be having that conversation after one race, particularly given that Bottas drove so well on Sunday and took the win. But Hülkenberg jumping the likes of Russell and Ocon, that's never going to happen, is it?
No, I'm thinking that's quite a long shortlist. If Hülkenberg's name's on it,
20 drivers.
yeah, exactly. I suppose, yeah. If Ocon and Russell weren't able to do it for whatever reason, yeah, I suppose Hülkenberg is a sensible pick considering where he is. Sensible pick. I said that's strange, but sensible pick considering where he is in his career. I think he's a quick driver. I really like Hülkenberg, so you've asked the right person. So. Yeah, why not? I'll leave it at that. And also, don't forget super chats.
I've done them.
Oh, you've done them, sorry.
He listens, doesn't he? He clearly listens.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sorry.
Wow. I'll swear at you now. Can you tell us the specs of your PC upgrades? I can't because I'm ordering it tomorrow. Well, provided money goes in the account.
Yeah.
So,
I can.
Yeah. Jonty can. Go on, Jonty.
Yeah, Ryzen 2600X. So... X-Core, 12 thread, 16 gig of 3200 DDR4 RAM, and 1660 Ti for lots of monitor outputs. Plus a few other bits, but it's 90 plus gold power supply. If you know what I'm talking about, then you'll understand this better.
I switch it on and it goes... That's all I know. That's my knowledge of computers. So yeah, Jonty's helped me out with that. Thank you very much, mate, I must say, for that one. I'm sorry I can't get down, but I'll explain another day what's crazy stuff going on at home at the moment. So yes, but it should hopefully, I think it says within 7 days. I'm going to give him a ring tomorrow and get it ordered and whatnot. So yes, and then I'll share you some pictures and maybe give you a little tour of it. When it arrives, because you guys are the whole reason I'm able to upgrade it. So thank you very much for that one once again for the 3 millionth time. What about traction control, says Aiden. I assume you mean returning. Not for me. I understand that some people quite like these driver aids, but they do tend to create dominant teams. Active suspension, Williams, 1992, and it takes away that drive. I know you can still spin to it. We saw spins in the traction control era, didn't we? Not all the time, but they did happen. But you lose that. If a driver loses control of their car, they need to be spinning because they've made a mistake. They shouldn't be saved out, but they shouldn't be saved by driver aids. Plus, talking of cost caps, that's even more money because that'll just cost a fortune, and I'm just not a fan of driver aids. Having said that, when I used to play, it was Grand Prix Manager 2 back in there, I used to make sure all of those were legal, and my car had all the driver aids on it to the point where every single race it locked out the front row by about 7 seconds and then broke down halfway through the race. So it never quite worked out. But are you a fan of driver aids, Dan? Do you like seeing them or no?
No. No, I just... It depends, obviously, what side of things you like about Formula One. If you're more, the drivers having ultimate control over the vehicle and safety, if that's your go-to for Formula One, then great. But for me personally, I like it when there's a little bit of uncertainty, when the cars are difficult to drive. And I suppose on circuits like Monaco, if there was traction control, I actually haven't seen a race with traction control. So you two are, without sounding rude, more experienced in this side of things. But I imagine for tracks like Monaco, any sort of mistake is almost out the window. and in wet conditions, I suppose it makes it easier to drive. So things like that for me, when there's a little bit of tension in the air, you're not too sure if someone's going to make a mistake. That all adds to the experience. So no, I'm not a big fan of it.
No, where is it? Tim Bob says it should be about the driver, not the tech. That sums it up for me. It should be about the driver. Did you add anything to that, John T?
Well, it should, the various aids, it's like, where do you stop? Do you give them just launch control, or maybe a bit of traction control, or a bit of stability control? Where does it end? You end up back at the FW14B with the full active suspension that keeps the car flat through every corner automatically and switches to low drag mode on the straights to get an extra 10 mile an hour. It goes ridiculous as more A's come in, so it's easy to just have a flat ban on them all.
I agree. Yeah, it got too far. They kind of legalized so much, didn't they, at one point, and it was just not necessary. What was your favourite ever Bahrain Grand Prix? Ben McCarthy wants to know. Now that's a question I wish I hadn't read. I think 2014 was a good one, wasn't it? I know it kind of got exciting because of that safety car towards the end, but that was a really good one. But I seem to remember 2000 and... Right, I'm going to Google it. I'll hand it over to you guys, whichever wants to go first, but I'm just going to go and have a double check. So I think it's 2009 I'm thinking of.
Honestly, I would put last year very, very high on the Bahrain Grand Prix list. Because there was none of that. I know we all like the dramas and what have you, but there wasn't much of it. It was raw racing. That was why it was so good.
I feel we had a good qualifying session as well on that one, didn't we? That was all up in the air a little bit. So, yeah, that was... I mean, I say 2012 because, one of the best drivers on the grid got their first ever podium there, just throwing that one out there. But most of 2012's ones were good, weren't they? But I think 2014 for me, that's the one that just edges it.
I can't remember if it was 2008 or 2009. I think it was 2008 because Kubica was on pole. Yeah.
That would have been 08.
But that's a really good shout on last year, John, because I think that was one of the best races of last year, massively underrated. That's the problem with races towards the start of the season, though, isn't it? They tend to get forgotten when you get towards the end of the year, but I loved it last year. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, in the past, there's been some epic Australian Grand Prix, and they just kind of fall to the wayside and get forgotten. 2010, that was an incredible race, and people looked at races later in the year.
Speculation on Lowe. I've not heard it. Have either of you heard anything on Paddy Lowe other than his final words as he left?
He's either feet up chilling at home or feet up chilling in the sun somewhere. I know what would be.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't want to sit and talk about Williams because I just don't know what to say. All those people just think that all I do is sit and slag them off all the time, but they were it was diabolical in Australia. Even when we did the race reaction, Jonty, it was really tough because we sort of both went, well, they were slow, but not as slow as we thought they'd be, even though they ended 2 laps down with George Russell. I'm not counting Kubica in that because he had some issues with the car and whatnot, so that's why he was so far back. But 2 laps down with Russell, nowhere in terms of pace, nowhere in qualifying, and we're sort of going, yeah, but they're not as far off as we thought they'd be. So I don't know what to say on Williams. I just hope they can sort that out. But yeah, and I'm going to finish. I think we'll finish on this one because it's a couple of good ones. Somebody earlier said I was 50 today. That is incredibly rude. I'm a long way off 50. Well, yeah. No. But going on this one from Peter, who says, which team will be the biggest surprise this year? Seems like the perfect one to end on for just we get ready for Bahrain, when we're finally going to see roughly what kind of running order we have. Come to you first, Dan, because I'm just that cruel.
That's all right. I mean, I've made a few mistakes today, so that's allowed. I will say McLaren. And I know we don't want to use results from the first weekend to judge the whole season, but getting into Q3, that already surprised me a little bit, and the race pace didn't seem too bad either. And I know Renault, they seem to mess up their qualifying a little bit, and Gasly as well, so that helped them out a little bit. But I still didn't really expect them to maybe be in a best of the rest fight. So I reckon McLaren could be quite a bit of a surprise this year.
What about you, John T?
Again, we've only got one race to go on, but I have a worry that the big surprise will be Renault, in the fact that they will be just as quick as they were last year and kind of stay there. I'm worried that the others have caught them up so much they might start to pass them now. I know Hulk did very well in the race, and Danny Rick had some issues, but they didn't seem as quick as they really should have been, and that was a big worry.
Yeah, I mean, qualifying wasn't great, but they were only a couple of hundredths off Q3, weren't they? Which is just how close it's going to be. But I think Renault are a concern. But I'm going to say, I've seen a few in chat saying Alpha, but I'm going to say Toro Rosso. I think they might surprise. I think Kvyat, once again, in the points. He's not failed to finish outside the points since, I think, Singapore, since USA 2017. All right, he had a year off, but that's not the point, and the stat still stands. I think, yeah, I think they could be quite good. I do. I've got high hopes for Alex Albon. The problem is we have to kind of gauge those hopes because he's in a midfield car, so we don't really know what that means. It's not like having high hopes for Leclerc, who goes on and wins races. But I want to go Toro Rosso. I just think if that Honda is as powerful as has been made out, so on par, if not better than the Renault, a half-decent chassis. Christian Horner said that car was slippery in a straight line and they were expecting in Australia. Could see them sitting quite pretty. And look at Bahrain coming up as well. Look how good they were last year with Gasly. So, yeah, I'm going to go Toro Rosso. Why not? It's tough, though, that midfield, isn't it? It's so tough to call. Even after a race weekend, I still have no bloody idea where anybody is.
Well, that's part of the problem of Albert Park. We could have 10 races around there that could all end up different. We still wouldn't know.
Do you think Haas are best of the rest at the minute? Well, they are in the championship, but
as things stand, probably.
Yeah, they seemed almost destined to get that 6th and 7th, didn't they? They were quite comfortably in that position, until that wheel decided to say goodbye. So, yeah, I think they are, which is very good for me. I got no issue with that.
yeah, it's one race to go off, and we're sort of trying to pick a 4th place. But I think based on Australia, Haas were very good, and I think Magnussen, had Bottas not won that race or had not won it by the margin he did, and Verstappen hadn't got on the podium, I think Magnussen would have been a good shout for driver of the day. But then so would Lance Stroll. Yeah, I don't really know. We're going to end it there because I could just sit speculating about that midfield all day because I could sit down and do a list of how I think the running order is, and it would probably change 3 or 4 times before I picked a final one because it's just so close in that midfield. And nothing we saw in Australia changed that because, like I say, Renault got knocked out, was a disappointing qualifying for them, but a couple of hundredths and they're both through. So we're in for a good season in theory, and I'm very much looking forward to next weekend. But as I've promised, I will say the Bahrain Grand Prix will be terrible. It'll be the worst race ever. Because last year, if you are new to the channel, every time I said a race would be good, it was crap, and vice versa. So, yeah, it'll be terrible, absolutely terrible. Thank you very much, Dan, for coming along, mate. I'm so pleased that you've got over the emotion from Grosjean retiring and losing a wheel again. But as I said to you, and I did steal this from somebody else, but as I said to you, at least this year, they managed to keep 7 wheels on the cars. So.
Yeah, baby steps, baby improvements. Cheers for having me, man. I hope you enjoy your meal out for your 40th birthday. Thanks for having me.
Dan's final appearance on the F1 West. You've just witnessed it. Yes, there will be alcohol. So I should probably say now, no video tomorrow, understandably. Thank you very much, Jonty, as well, for coming along, mate. I will talk to you both, I'm sure, in the week about plans for next week in terms of the race. But yeah, I don't know what to say. I can imagine you probably do a little dance every time you realise F1 is back, just like me.
Yeah, especially getting back onto a really good track. That's going to make a big difference. So, hyped for that one. And thanks for having me on, and enjoy your meal. Again, happy birthday.
Oh, thanks, guys. That's ace. But yeah, I will talk to you both soon, and thank you very much. I'm sure I'll talk to you in the week.
Most likely.
See you later.
Bye, chat.
Awesome. Thank you very much to Jonty and to Dan. Thanks everyone for your birthday messages. I'll say it again. Really appreciate that one. I am not 400 years old. DT Dash, least favourite person right now. But yes, thank you very much for your birthday messages and for coming along for this stream. I know it's a bit of a speculative one. I know some people don't like that, but we're just going off the reports that have been coming out the last couple of days. But it's all build up next week for Bahrain, as you'll have seen on screen. Tuesday will be next week's rundown. Then on Thursday we will have the Bahrain Grand Prix Bahrain Grand Prix preview. Friday, I've not scheduled it, but I'm hoping, provided I can get things in order, I'm hoping to do an FP1 watch along with you all, which will be very similar to the testing ones where we just sit down and have a natter, and I'll keep you updated with what's going on track, of course. But that'll just come down to how well I can arrange some stuff at home. Saturday, the qualifying watch along and the qualifying reports, and then on Sunday, of course, it'll be the Bahrain Grand Prix race watch along and the Bahrain Grand Prix race reaction stream, followed by the debrief on the Monday. So loads coming up. F1 well and truly back. Very excited. Of course, in the meantime, you can follow me over on social media. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.